This is me. Yep, Halloween circa 1989, 1990. I'm in my childhood home in New Jersey, sitting on the living room floor, eating chocolate, Hershey's by the looks of it. Um, my expression told me three things. First, I've been caught red-handed, presumably consuming more chocolate than my parents agreed upon. Second, an ugly meltdown of a sugar crash is imminent. And third, over 300 chemical compounds found in cacao, including theobromine, traces of caffeine, and other compounds that activate the pleasure sectors of our brains, are coursing through my tiny body. What is it? For many people, chocolate is important in our daily lives. Mark a celebration, use it as a reward, and comfort and consolation after a day, to express care and even affection for others. The shared reverence for chocolate that unites many of us in this room today is ancient. Chocolate, derived from cacao nibs or seeds or beans, originated in Mesoamerica. Mesoamerica is a collection of diverse civilizations that covered the geographic areas of the modern-day countries Mexico, Guatemala, Honduras, Belize, El Salvador, Nicaragua, and Costa Rica. Following Spain's invasion and colonization of the region at the beginning of the 16th century, Europeans were exposed to indigenous chocolate, for which they developed a passion and attempted, with some variations, to mimic Mesoamerican methods of preparation. However, the chocolate that I consumed in my New Jersey home in 1990, typically something that is coated in chocolate or shaped into a solid bar chocolate, is entirely modern. Prior to the last quarter of the 19th century, the prevailing method of consuming chocolate was as a beverage, which could be served either hot or cold. Today, I will discuss chocolate in its drink form and the role that it played in 18th century European society as an exotic and addictive import and symbol of luxury. In this presentation, I will discuss a range of chocolate wares and artworks inspired by the European craze for consuming chocolate and the ways in which labor was made visible and invisible in the craze for, in the visual imaginary of 18th century chocolate consumption. Since arriving at the Allen, I've been researching this French silver chocolate pot that is in the bottom corner of the screen there. And which was created by Jean-Baptiste Joseph Leroux. And I have been thinking about what this curious vessel can tell us about its original owners and the importance of imported beverages like hot chocolate, coffee, and tea for European consumers. First, let it be known that the Allen silver chocolate pot, dated approximately to 1755, is an exceptionally rare work of art. Very little 17th or 18th century French silver has survived the reigns of King Louis XIV, Louis XV, or the French Revolution of 1789. Fine French silver was repeatedly melted down to fund the numerous wars that bled the monarchy's coffers. This chocolate pot is an excellent example of the late Rococo style. The gadrooning around the body makes the entire vessel look as though it was made of liquid. The subtle asymmetrical rocaille cartouche, which supports the handle, as well as the scalloped shell at the mouth of the spout, are key features of Rococo ornament, but employed with a restraint that was increasingly popular in French decorative arts of the 1750s. However, style alone will not tell us the date of this vessel's production. Most European silver has a set of hallmarks punched into the bottom of the object, which can often, although not always, identify the name of the artist, the year it was made, and the place of the object's manufacturer. On the exterior of the base of the pot, so we're looking at this blue highlighted section here blown up, we see that there are three hallmarks visible. There is a partial strike of a crowned W, which is likely the warden's mark for the town of Breguet in 1753. Opposite this, there is a crowned fleur-de-lis, which is the recognition mark for the town of Lilleux. Both of these are towns in northern France, not far from the French border with Belgium. The final mark, which has been partially obscured by the deep gadrooning on the vessel, is a crown on top with the letters IB, which sits on top of the letters LR. This is one of the maker's marks for the artist Jean-Baptiste Joseph Leroux. Taken together, these marks all tell us that Leroux began making this pot in Breguet, France in 1753 and received the Warden's stamp of approval in Lille when the work was completed and ready for sale or discharge to the person who commissioned it. In this case, there is one more clue on the front of the vessel that provides some information about its first owner. There's an unknown heraldic shield. The emblem is very similar to the heraldic shield of 10 white diamonds on a red background for the Laligne family, noble family of France and Belgium. It is possible that the modification we see here in this heraldic shield may suggest that the pot belonged to a minor branch of this family and that they could have resided in Belgium. Given Leroux's proximity to Belgium and the fact that this object managed to avoid being melted down in France, this is a plausible hypothesis. But what do we make of this vessel's handle? It projects at a 90-degree angle to the spout of the pot, making it somewhat awkward to hold and pour out liquid for oneself. Art historians and cultural historians have said very little about the awkward shape of the chocolate pot, its origins, and why the vessel is shaped this way. For the earliest known methods of indigenous peoples preparing chocolate drinks, we look to the Maya and later Mexica or Aztec peoples. In order to create an aerated head of thick foam that would sit at the top of the beverage, kind of like head on a glass of beer, which was the preferred method for the Maya and Mexica, women would pour the drink at a great height from one vessel into the other. And we see that in the central image here. And they would repeat this step until the desired foam developed. However, by the 16th century, Spanish colonizers developed a molinillo, a whisk that's typically made out of wood, that was inserted into the top of the chocolate pot and turned vigorously. And we can see this kind of recreation of colonizers using that. This performed two functions. First, the whisk encouraged the chocolate to melt evenly in the hot water and prevented the chocolate from solidifying or worse, burning at the base of the vessel. But also, if whisked long enough, it would produce the desired foam similar to Mesoamerican method of preparing chocolate. Although early colonizers initially recorded their thoughts about how much they despised the taste and texture of indigenous chocolate beverages, we can see from other firsthand accounts, trade logs, and increased desire for chocolate pots, cups, and other wares in Europe, that European consumers quickly developed a taste for chocolate beverages and actually did very little to modify the recipes at first. The Maya and Mexica people typically drank chocolate both hot and cold. They often enhanced the flavor of these drinks by adding aromatics like ear flowers, colorant annota, which is gives the drink a reddish brown hue, vanilla, chili, honey, and also maize. The latter was mainly used as a thickening device. Spanish colonizers and Europeans in the 17th and 18th century modified some of the spices to use similar products that were more readily available to them. For example, European consumers continued adding vanilla, but swapped black pepper and cinnamon for chile because it was more easily available. And sugar, which was an exciting new import that's coming through the transatlantic slave trade, they supplanted honey with sugar. Occasionally, they would add rose water to mimic the aromatic qualities for the indigenous ear flower, which they really had trouble getting. The labor involved in making chocolate beverages is also important to note here. Harvesting cacao nibs or roasting them and then grinding them, and finally packing them into tight cakes or patties so that they could last longer and they would also travel more easily. This was all laborious work. After colonization, Jesuit missionaries forced indigenous peoples to continue growing and harvesting cacao. However, when the demand from Spanish consumers far outpaced what they could supply, Jesuit missionaries utilized enslaved labor from Portuguese colonies in West Africa to keep up with demand. As the taste for chocolate spread throughout Europe, it is estimated that nearly 10% of the volume of the whole transatlantic slave trade went to work on cacao plantations in Brazil. It is sad to say that little about the cacao business has changed since the 17th century. Today, even though most of the major chocolate manufacturers are located in the United States, Belgium, and Switzerland, chocolate is largely harvested through coerced labor in West Africa. According to the US Bureau of International Labor Affairs, nearly 60% of the world's cocoa is cultivated and harvested in Cote d'Ivoire and Ghana today. Latest studies estimate that 1.56 million children are engaged in dangerous and exploitive child labor on cacao farms in these two countries alone. This number is actually down by about 500,000 since 2019, but not quite enough progress. The odds are if we have consumed a chocolate bar in the United States, it was probably the product of child labor. However, this type of hard labor of harvesting and the actual grinding of cacao is often absent from the 18th century depictions of chocolate consumption in Europe. However, the labor of chocolate servers is frequently juxtaposed with the leisure and luxury of the social elite's consumption of hot chocolate. So for example, here we have Jean-Etienne Lyotard's Chocolate Girl, which I should mention, it says it there, but this is pastel and it's giant. It's very, very large. It's a beautiful piece. But this is pretty typical for a lot of the works that Lyotard made at this moment of chocolate maids or chocolate servants. And we can see that she is sporting some of the wares. This is a Tremblo's vessel, so it is a beaker shape with a handle on both sides typically, and it will have a saucer that comes up around the base of it because the beakers have such a high center of gravity, they typically will fall over quite easily, and you want to have something to catch all of your precious chocolate and foam that could come out of it. In Mozart's opera, Così fan tutte from 1790, the maid, Despina, provides social commentary on the imbalanced labor of producing and consuming chocolate. In 18th century Europe, hot chocolate was still almost exclusively consumed by the nobility and the rising wealthy bourgeoisie. Despina laments, "What an abominable life a lady's maid leads, from morning till night, sweating, toiling, laboring, and then, after doing all this, we get nothing out of it ourselves. I've been beating the chocolate for half an hour. Now it's ready, and it's my lot to stand and smell it with a dry mouth. Isn't my mouth just like yours? Oh, gracious mistress, why should you get the real thing and I only get to smell of it? By Bacchus, I'm going to taste it." She does. Oh, it's good. Here we also have this horseman and lady drinking chocolate. And it's a very amorous scene where they're appearing to stare deeply into each other's eyes. But there's also this the same type of chocolate pot that we have here, very similar, where you have this 90-degree handle, which it makes it awkward to serve oneself comfortably with a chocolate pot like this. But it is an advantageous angle for someone else to pour the liquid and from this vessel, especially if they're standing, like the servant is here. And you can see that she has something in her hands. This is the whisking stick. So you have to kind of rub it back and forth so that it can create this perpetual motion. There's also a figure in the center of the scene, which is a representation of a blackamoor, which is a historical term. Blackamoors are exoticized Western fabrications of anonymous Black Africans. They're often paired with props like this turban here, and it kind of creates associations between this vague North Africa, Turkey, America figure. really it was not a representation of a particular person or a portrait, but more so fitting in as an idealized version of what this level of service and luxury would look like. Black racialized bodies in representations of sugar, tea, chocolate, and coffee are very common in 18th century. They're often used as props coupled with the exotic, luxurious treat. The same thing here with these Meissen figurines, and there's very little change that happens in both of these scenes. And one, you have this suitor who's kind of kneeling down to kiss her hand, and that's one of the beauties of porcelain, is that there is a mold for a lot of these pieces, but they can also be adaptable. So you can add figures in, add flowers in, but you notice that in both of these compositions, one of them was made in the 1730s, and another one was made from a later mold in, I believe, the 1954. The only thing that's changed is that the one kneeling lover has been removed, but the importance of this Black racialized figure as, symbolizing this, perpetual servitude of chocolate drinks in this is important to the composition and signaling this level of luxury and leisure. Chocolate was also believed to be an aphrodisiac in 18th century Europe. Many prints, paintings, and porcelain figurines underscore this connection between chocolate, love, and sex. For example, here we have another Meissen couple. Chocolate, like coffee, sugar, tea, is a luxury good. And they're also showcasing particular chocolate wares that were made specifically for this type of new beverage. So we have chocolate pots and coffee pots that look almost identical. Only somebody who knows the difference between the two would be able to tell, but otherwise they look completely the same. And teapots can often be similar as well, but you have people during this time commissioning large garnitures of a coffee pot, teapot, and a chocolate pot with individual cups that serve with them. So it's, this luxurious thing that is then prompting the collection of luxurious goods just to serve it. But this one figural group shows an anonymous wealthy couple embracing as they consume hot chocolate. The man is likely a Freemason, which is a secret class of society for men. And we know that because he's wearing this white and blue Masonic apron on his lap. And the attentive pug and the ribbons on the woman's wrist and collars may suggest that she was a member of Mopsorden, which was the Order of the Pug. Mopsorden offered memberships to men and women from nobility and wealthy bourgeoisie. So in this Meissen group, the couple's social and economic capital is linked to the history of chocolate in Europe. The cost of consuming chocolate, including all of the vessels and sugar used to prepare it, made it a luxury enjoyed only by the elite. In comparison to some of the other artworks that we just saw, what is conspicuously absent here is the representation of the labor. We don't have a blackamoor figure standing in for it. We don't have a maid serving the chocolate. However, labor or the laborers are still implied. You may notice that they're in an outdoor scene. You see some flowers on the ground here. And if I could turn this around, I would. But this porcelain figure, the two figures are sitting on a column base that has kind of fallen over. So it looks like they're in this outdoor grotto. So suggesting that we're outdoors in some kind of, ruined, beautiful architecture, laborers would have had to bring out the furniture. This is a traveling table that they have here, which is not terribly light. And of course, all of the chocolate, accoutrement, and somebody to actually undoubtedly stir the chocolate. So even though we don't see the labor, the fact that they're out here enjoying this luxurious treat indicates that labor was actually done and probably not by them to consume it. Although most of Europe's social elite had developed a taste or even an obsession with hot chocolate, there was still many people who viewed chocolate consumption as well as tea and coffee consumption as a vice and a sign of a deep moral failing. The British 18th century artist William Hogarth includes explicit references to hot chocolate in his fourth and sixth plates of the Rake's Progress series. The main protagonist, who is named Tom Rakewell, Hogarth was never accused of being subtle, was a member of White's Chocolate House. And White's is the oldest and one of the most elite social clubs for men in London. Actually, the club still only offers memberships to men today. Many of the men from the British royal family are current and former members of White's. And hot chocolate was served there in addition to other beverages in the 18th century. It was founded in the 17th century as a hot chocolate shop in St. James Square in Mayfair, and eventually it moved to its newer location. We can see in this kind of chaotic image here, this is taking place in the gambling den of White's Chocolate House. And we see our main protagonist, Tom, who has really fallen apart, quite literally lost his wig, completely consumed with this act of gambling. He's probably lost a lot of his money at this point as well. And we also see that there's some smoke and presumably flames. So the gambling den is actually on fire right now, and he's so consumed with the act of what he's doing that, completely ignoring what's going on. And this is probably a reference to when the gambling den did catch fire in 1733 as well. But this gambling den that was in the back of White's Chocolate House actually earned a nickname in the 18th century, and the nickname was Hell. So not a great place. But then in the other scene, in plate number 4, we can also see that White's is represented here. So this is a moment earlier, 2 stages earlier, where Tom has been apprehended by the law. They're coming for certain debts that he's owed. And of course, his dear Sarah, who follows him and tries to help him along the way. She doesn't learn any lessons. She's trying to help him. But we can see in the background, there's all of these carriages and sedans that are here. So this is in St. James Square. And you'll see right back there, there is the sign for White House. So all of these very wealthy people are all clamoring, or all of these wealthy men are all clamoring and trying to get into this very elite society. So the social practice of drinking hot chocolate spurred a demand for specific vessels and luxurious accessories to serve this fashionable treat. But there was a great divide between who had the opportunity to harvest and grind and serve the chocolate in the 18th century versus who had the luxury of consuming it. It is true that the performance of service captured in these paintings, prints, and porcelain figurines helped to solidify and normalize social hierarchies in 18th century Europe and the status of chocolate as an imported luxury. Thank you.